ما أريد من هذا الشعب إلا أن يزيد في الحمد والشكر إلى الله عز وجل، ويزيد من محبة الوطن، ويزيد من العمل ومضاعفة العمل لما يسعى فيه من خير له وللدولة والأهل. هذا اللي أنا أدوره من الشعب، وربنا إن شاء الله يوفقنا جميعا على ما يحب ويرضى.
تقرب منازلها إلا محب زايد أسسها واليوثن وراها داروا على الدانات 7 أبد.
Yes, I'd like to express my gratitude to the rulers and the government of the UAE. I can say, as having worked and travelled around the world and lived in many different countries, I find this the safest, it's the most efficient country. I've often said that Food Nation could not have, the success of Food Nation couldn't have happened anywhere else, certainly not in Europe or the US, and it's thanks to the
Hello everybody and welcome to our program. Today we are glad to have Mr. Magnus Mumby, and he is a famous chef and the founder of Food Nation. And today we will talk about his journey and his work in the UAE. Hello Mr. Magnus and welcome to our program. Can you tell us today about yourself and about your background?
Yeah, sure. I'm a Michelin chef. This is sort of a level of chefing that we use in Europe and the West. Quite a high level of achievement. But it started way back when in my parents' allergy clinic. My parents and my extended family had a sort of medical background. So my father's a professor of medicine, my mother's a nurse, etc. Back in the 70s and 80s, they were working primarily in food and environmental illnesses. These allergies to foods, intolerances, things that were, with the rise of processed foods, all of a sudden there started to be a different, a new sort of field of illnesses coming out there, which I'm sure, 40, 50 years later now, this is becoming more and more prevalent. So anyway, that's kind of where my focus started. So I would help out in the clinics by people needing very sort of basic but very tasty meals and food, often with a lot of restrictions. It's what would probably be called a paleo diet now, but back then it was called the Stone Age diet, which was basically no kind of dairy. There was no coffees or modern processed foods, no gluten or breads and all those kind of things that required cooking. The Stone Age diet was basically whatever sort of cavemen could eat. That was all you were allowed to eat. So that's where it sort of began, was trying to prepare these kind of simple basic meals. Little did I realise then that this would become a kind of cornerstone of what I did, which was that sort of nutrition elevated to a much better fine dining standard.
Amazing. Mr. Can you tell us how or who made you to become a chef?
If the honest story to that is, it was escape. I was always like an adventurer as a kid, and I just sort of dreamed of growing up and escaping and traveling the world. But I didn't really have any means to do that. So when I was 17, I just jumped on a plane, flew to Greece, where I had read all these stories and Arabian Nights and all these escapades and things like that. I flew to Greece, and it all sounds very romantic. It was a little bit different. I flew to Greece, but by 6 p.m. that night I was working in a restaurant, simply because I had a skill set with food. As a teenager, I'd worked in and around food and local restaurants on the weekends after school and so I had a little bit of understanding. Back in those days, this was the 1980s, so the world was a very different place back then, and everything was cooked. There was no fast food, there was no Deliveroo or Uber Eats or any of these things. Everything was made, everybody had to eat from natural. You used to have to go and shop at the marketplace, so it was a very, very different world. But the one thing you could always get, working in a restaurant usually came with a plate of food and a bed for the night. So as a young sort of gentleman from the UK, those were two things I needed. So that was it. That started my journey. I realised that I had a way that I could work, earn my keep, travel the world, and it was perfect.
Amazing. Mr. Can you just share with us some challenges it faced you in the last 35 years old?
I think early on in my career, it's probably one of the biggest challenges I faced. At the time, I was not long back in England from having travelled, quite extensively. And I'd won what's called a stage to work with a very famous chef in the UK called Marco Pierre White. This was a real big achievement and a very proud achievement. At the time, I ended up having an injury, a tendon injury, which needed microsurgery. Basically, I had a series of complicated operations on my hand, which meant I was out of work for about 6 months. So by the time that I got back into the kitchens, things had moved on. My career, Marco Pierre White's career, all of these things, everybody had moved on. So that what could have been a different direction in my career path ended up a different way. However, it was very fortuitous, and praise God. What came out of that is when I recovered from the operation, I took a very different job in a local town near where I lived. And we won a huge amount of awards, and by the end of that year, Esquire magazine had nominated me as one of the top 10 new chefs of the year in the UK, and that kind of, I never looked back from that moment really. That article spurned everything that came after.
Okay, Mr. Who support you and help you in your journey?
On my journey? I think you have to take inspiration from whoever and wherever you can. I think one of the things I learned on my travels was trust in God, trust in the universe, trust in life. If you're following a path that you're passionate about, and your career, all the time. I'll give you an example of what I mean there. Every time I made a choice because I was passionate about it, it was a very interesting or exciting opportunity. It went fantastically well. Every time I made a choice because the salary was better, was a bad choice. So I would always caution that, follow your heart, follow your inspiration, and follow what your true goal is. The paycheck is irrelevant.
So who brought you in the UAE to start your January in 2014?
2014, that was.
Just tell us the story.
It's funny, I had two options. I was living in Cornwall at the time, which was a very romantic location. I was living on a beachfront. Stormy and rainy some of the time, but it was a very beautiful location, and I had an opportunity to. There was a huge big hotel on the cliff tops in Cornwall, a very famous place called the Headland Hotel. I was offered the executive chef's job there. Now, I had spoken with a colleague about a new opening and a new restaurant launch in Dubai about 6 months prior to that, and then nothing else. I hadn't really had any other conversations around that, so I kind of didn't think that anything was moving on that. Maybe the opening hadn't got ahead. Anyway, I literally got to Christmas of 2013, and then I got calls from a number of different places with different offers, and that was one of those moments where I had to make that choice that I just spoke about what does your gut instinct, what does your passion and so on lead you. And the passion was that it was an opportunity to travel, to explore, to come to a new country, new culture, and that the desire for that was the winning choice. So I accepted that job and moved to the UAE in Christmas 2013.
Wow, amazing actually. Okay, so do you have any career that you are proud of? One of your family, one of your members?
In my family, I suppose my father's always been a driving force in that. He's probably, he is without a doubt the cleverest man I know. I wouldn't automatically make him the best father, but certainly the cleverest man, and very, very driven, very knowledgeable, very fair man, very talented, and there was a lot to live up to. I think that's people ask me about why did I choose going into chefing. Part of me always wonders whether that's the one thing that my dad couldn't do. Not to say that he's a terrible cook, but he was very good at lots of things. Being a chef was not one of them. So maybe that was the reason that inspired me to choose a different field.
So, Mr., how did you start your Food Nation in the UAE?
The founding of Food Nation was just before I'd left for the summer of 2016 to go back to the UK. Now, I had a business opportunity that I was going to go back and launch over there. Only a very small, modest little business, but I'd finished with the restaurants I'd set up here and thought, right, now is the time for a quieter, slower pace of life. Just before I'd left, I was asked to do help with a presentation to a group of a well-known group of schools. Because my background as a qualified nutritionist from Oxford, as well as my chefing background, they wanted sort of both of those skill sets to look at the sort of nutrition value and school catering. So yeah, I accepted the job. It was only a consultation and a presentation that I had to do. And I made a comment during that presentation. I'm not known for being quiet and keeping my tongue still. I made comments about the fact that I was very surprised at the quality of food, the way that these services were operated and so on. Given the level of clients and customers and so on, I mean, you know, people in the UAE, private schools, well-known brand names and things like that. And I felt that the food that was being offered and served in a lot of these institutions was way below what it should be given who their customers were. And that basically, I made comments to that effect. Not ungracious comments, but I just put my critical eye, as I would criticize myself. I put my critical eye, made comments, and then I was given a challenge. They said, we agree, so do something about it. And I've never been one to walk away from a challenge, so I went back home, spent a couple of months to come up with the plan, as I said earlier, develop the Eat Bright, the program, what it stood for, how it would work, the whole repertoire of recipes and an ethos around that, from everything from sustainability to how the food and the meals are put together. And we were offered one coffee shop in a very well-known school that we still work with now. We were offered to take over the coffee shop to see what the Eat Bright program of Food Nation, what interest that would gather. Anyway, 36 months later, we were the biggest school caterer in the UAE, so that was the answer was...
Wow, amazing. And could you tell us how Food Nation grown in the UAE?
Very quickly would be the answer to that. Again, it was, I jokingly say it's like a mechanic trying to build a car while the car's moving. We were trying to put wheels on, and whilst we were hurtling down the road, we were trying to, add wheels and so on. It grew that quickly. I mean, it was really, this was the sort of first time that people had spotlighted and highlighted food in schools, nutrition-based, but addressing also sustainability, the packaging. What we now take for granted 10 years later, this was 9 years ago in 2016, so this is our 9th year of operations. So the cardboard and compostable packaging, wooden cutlery, corn flour and cornstarch cutlery, all of these kind of things that are all, ecological friendly and very, very sustainable. They were not prevalent in the schools, not back then. I mean, this has since grown into that, and Food Nation has played a big part in importing and in introducing these as staples into the market. So this coffee shop, basically, the vision, sustainable packaging, it was very different. The foods on offer were more in line with high street brands and the kind of popularity. It was very different from what school catering had been up till then. So once this happened, it was very Instagrammable. Social media switched on to this, and it just became, it was very, very popular. It was picked up on very quickly. And from that, we got a huge amount of approaches from a lot of schools, different education groups, different education sectors. And basically the growth came, we grew as quickly as we could without overreaching. I've always been a very firm believer in you grow organically. Don't expand too quickly. That's the reason that, most campaigns of any sort, whether it's business, growth, opportunities, over expansion too quickly is usually the reason for collapses. So we grew at a steady pace that we were happy with, and still continuing 9 years later to this date. So.
Mr. We are actually proud to hear your story. Can you just give us a definition of the success in your January?
Definition of success. Yeah. It's an all-encompassing question, but I think, and my answer may seem strange, but I would say probably happiness. Through any journey, you're going to have great days, you're going to have bad days, you're going to have terrible days, you're going to have average days. The point is just wherever you sit in terms of being happy and being okay with those days, that to me would be the definition of success. Because if to give up and throw in the towel on a bad day, obviously it's not going to lead to success. If you're too overjoyous and focus too much on the achievements of a good day, you're going to lose the bigger picture. So I think just being happy and in any set of circumstances, the thing for me was all through my journey was cooking and food. And that's a real gift and a real privilege to be able to do that, because most of the celebrations and most of the great things in life all revolve around food, whether it's breakfast or evening meal. Family time is one of the most important times, the weekend meals that we share. Weddings, funerals, christenings, the different religions, the different religious gatherings to celebrate newborns, and all the different festivals that you bring together, all focus around food. So you're always present for the real, and it's not just for the births and the happy times. It's also for the sadder times, when people have passed and so on. So yeah, being part of all of those events and the food around them is a real privilege, and it's just being happy. As I said, in adverse circumstances as well as good times. We'll always have good and bad. For example, we had terrible times during COVID. All the schools closed, canteens closed, there was no food allowed and all these things. So and the world, it wasn't just my industry, but it's how do you continue with those? So, and being able to take what seems like a crisis and turn it into an opportunity. So during COVID, for instance, we developed an app and moved into delivering food to people's homes. So when the students were all having Zooms and classes online, we figured out another way to get nutrition and food. So the happiness would be the answer to that. Happy with wherever you are and whatever position you're in. There will always be challenging times and there'll be great times. Just take them both with the same grace and be happy with them. And that to me would be the definition of success.
So, Mr. could you tell us your advice for young people where they want to open a new project or a new specific something? Could you give them some advice?
Yeah, sure. I would find someone or some organization that you would like to emulate, and then get as close to them as you can. Keep the focus on just progressing on a daily basis. People, especially around food and chefing, have this idea of perfection and greatness and so on. Now, how do we get there? The answer to that is just by making a small amount of progress each day. We just focus on the day, getting a little bit better at a number of skills, and we continue this through our life's journey. Everybody, a virtuoso musician will just keep improving and getting better and better throughout his career. He doesn't start off as a virtuoso musician. He has to learn his scales and so on and put his time and practice, and he progresses a little bit better each day. That would be the secret. Well, it's not a secret. It's a very simple answer. Just work hard, progress, improve on a daily basis, and before you know it, you will be exceptionally good, and people will be coming to you for the same advice.
So, Mr. Magnus, could you just say a thankful message for the UAE country?
Yes, I'd like to express my gratitude to the rulers and the government of the UAE. I can say, as having worked and travelled around the world and lived in many different countries, I find this the safest, it's the most efficient country. I've often said that Food Nation the success of Food Nation couldn't have happened anywhere else, certainly not in Europe or the US, and it's thanks to the efficiency and the ease with which the country works, even when there's a storm, and how speedily that's dealt with. The airports work, public transport works, things work, and if there's a problem, it's solved. That just makes business, it makes living, it makes life so much easier, so much more efficient, and it takes away so many of the stresses of everyday life. So I, for one, am very, very grateful to the UAE and all its rulers for making this such a wonderful place to live, to do business, and to have family and friends, and to enjoy life. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Magnus, to have you today with us, and thank you for your time, and we are glad to have your story. See you inshallah with the new project what you do in the future, and thank you guys for your watching.